Good evening. We are starting a new parak. We're on Daf Nun, and we are starting a parak that's referred to as Rabban Gamliel. For this parak, we need to give a little bit of background and then a caveat. Here's the background. Throughout this Masechta, we've learned about something called Maimer. Maimer is some type of Kiddushin Derabanan or Kiddushin Yibum, as it's been referred to by some of the Rishonim, and it doesn't have any bearing midoraisa, but it does have bearing midorabanan. We also know that there is an idea of a get being given to a Yevama, which really doesn't match. A get should be for marriage, and chalitza should be for yibum. So, what are the comparisons between Maimer and Tashma Shamita on the one hand? Yibum is typically performed by marriage and Tashma Shamita, and Gittin and chalitza. So that's really what's happening here, where we're going to highlight the actual backdrop as to why Maimer works and why get potentially works midrabanan in the case of a Yevama. That's the background. So here's the caveat. This Amud of Gemara needs about a year of analysis. There are probably over 20 cases that are going to be spoken about here, all in 5 words a pop. Every one of them has a Rashi, and if you look at the Rashi's beginning on Daf Nun at the new parak, you will see that they are voluminous and they carry all the way to the bottom of the next page. So this is one of those blot and shas where when you see a daf that doesn't look so long, it really means the blot is a lot harder than it looks. We don't have time to read every Rashi, and if we did, we wouldn't read every Rashi anyways. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to read this. It'll be relatively clear, but just recognize that we're scratching the surface on this particular Mishnah more so than in other Mishnayos. This Mishnah is very long. It goes until the last of the short lines on Nun Amud Beis. Let's get started with the new parak of Parak Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says as follows: Omer, ein get achar get. You cannot have one get after another get. Now let's look at Rashi just for this one so we can get a context of what the Mishnah is talking about. Rashi, not the first one on the parak, but the second one, Dibra Masal ein get achar get. What's the case of our Mishnah? The case, Rashi says, is shtei Yevamos Adam echad me'ach echad. So Reuven has 2 wives, Chana and Penina. Reuven dies, Chana and Penina fall to Shimon. So that's what's happening here. V'nasan get lezu v'get lezu. And he gave a get to each of his Yevamos, because he has his brother's 2 wives of Chana and Penina. Back inside. So ein get achar get. If you give a get to one woman, the second get is not relevant. It's a 0. If you wanted to marry the relatives of that woman who got the invalid get, you're allowed. However, had she been a grusha, had she actually been divorced, you could not marry her relatives. So if I give a get to Chana, and then I give a get to Penina, the get to Penina is a 0 because I already gave a get to one. The whole thing is over. The Zika is broken now. So that's what the case is talking about over here. If ein get, achar get. Once you give a get to the first of the 2 Yevamos, then the Zika for all women are severed between these 2 women and Shimon, and therefore only the first get matters. The second get doesn't matter, and therefore in the event that Shimon wanted to then marry a relative of Penina, that would be mutter because her get was a 0. V'lo maimer achar maimer. If you do maimer to one, then the Zika is over with, and the second maimer to the second wife doesn't count. V'lo be'ila achar be'ila. If you have tashma shamita with one, and therefore she's your Yevama, now you can't marry the other woman because you've already done Yibum to the first one, so the Bia afterwards is Aser, and it also has no bearing in regards to Yibum. She's not a Yevama. She's done because one of the first wife was already married. Below chalitza achar chalitza. And if you did chalitza on one of the wives, the Zika has also been severed, and therefore in chalitza achar chalitza. The Chachamim argue in the first 2 cases. The Chachamim omrim yesh get achar get. I disagree. There is a get achar get because they hold, and this gets into more of the lumdus of Zika, is that really the bond of Zika after a get is given to wife number 1 is only partially severed. It's not fully severed. And therefore, when a get is given to the second wife, because she still has a partial Zika to Shimon, the get is a get, and therefore her relatives, she's a grusha, and therefore her relatives would be usher to Shimon. And as well, the yesh maimer achar maimer, we do register the maimer that takes place with the second wife. Aval, they do agree with the Tanakama that lo achar be'ila, velo achar chalitza klum, that after be'ila happens and after chalitza happens with the first wife, in either of those cases of the 2 Yevamos, where he either has tashma shamita with, namely he does yibum, or he does chalitza to the first wife, those are final. They agree in those cases that even if there were to have been be'ila afterwards or chalitza afterwards, that they would not matter. All of that is case number 1. And then the Mishnah says ketzad. Now, normally when we see the word ketzad will explain to us something that we were trying to learn in the Reisha that we now want to learn in the Seifa. But that's not what's happening. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi, Dibur Hamaschel Ketzad, is 4 lines into the middle with Rashi's, 2/3 of the way down. And this Rashi says, Lav aplugtaihu kai. We're not talking about the machlokas between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim. Ela milsa ba'an pei nafshahi. This is a new matter altogether. And what is the question? Ve'ayavam echad ve'ayavama achas kai. The Gemara is asking, what is the case where there's one yavam and one yavama? V'achi kamar ketzad din yavam v'yavama. This is how the Gemara explains it. The word ketzad is saying, where are the halachos? What are the halachos with one yavam and one yavama? Not where Reuven has two wives, but Reuven's wife, Rachel, she was married to Reuven, Reuven died, and then Rachel fell to Shimon. There's no two wives, one yavam, one yavama. So says the Gemara, let's analyze the Mishnah, 6 lines into the Mishnah. Asa maimer biyavimto. If Shimon does maimer to Rachel, and v'nasan la get, and he also gives her a get, he did maimer and a get, so still tzricha hemenu chalitza. So the get counteracts the maimer, but she still is a yavama, and therefore, if he wants to free her, if she's going to marry anyone else, he still needs to do chalitza. The get doesn't fully function as a severing of the zika, and therefore, tzricha hemenu chalitza. Asa maimer v'chalitza, let's say that he did both. He did maimer and he did chalitza. Then tzricha himenu get, because you solve the yibum problem with chalitza. But if you did maimer, then you want to free her. You still also need to do a get. Next case, 6 lines from the bottom. Asa maimer uvaal. Let's say that Shimon does maimer to Rachel and he's intimate with her. So says the Gemara, that's the classical case of Yibum. This is the mitzvah in Chumash and Sefer Dvarim that we've been talking about the whole Masechta. The most classical, typical case of Yibum is that Reuven's married to Rachel. Reuven dies. Rachel falls to Shimon b'Yibum. Shimon does maimer to Rachel, and then they are intimate, and then they're married. That's great. That's the ideal. Okay, next case. Nasan get ve'asa maimer. Let's say that he did a get first, and then he did maimer. Then that's all backwards, and therefore tzricha get v'chalitza. You need both. What about nasan get uval? Let's say he gave a get, and then they were intimate afterwards, which is not allowed. Says the Gemara, you're 0 for 2. Tzricha get v'chalitza. The get was invalid because you were intimate afterwards, and she's still a yavama, so you need chalitza. Nasan get v'chalatz. If he gave a get and then did chalitza. In this case, nothing else needs to be done because the chalitza was done, and there's nothing else that needs to happen. She's totally free to go. Chalatz ve'asa maimer. So what happens if he does chalitza and then maimer was done, or nasan get uvaal, and he gave a get and then had tashma shamita with her? Or another possible scenario, ba'al ve'asa maimer. They were intimate and he did maimer. Nasan get b'chalatz, or he gave a get and then did chalitza. Ein achar chalitza klum. In both of these scenarios where there was chalitza, she is free to go with no strings attached. The zika has been severed. That brings us to the top of Nun Amud Beis. The Gemara says that the dinim that we just learned are true. Achas yavama achas. The yavam echad. This is true whether or not we're talking about one yavam and one yavama. The achas, it's also true with shtei yavamos liyavam echad, like we saw in the Resha. Ketzad. What are the details of shtei yavamos to one person? Says the Gemara as follows. Asa maimer bezu umaimer bezu. If you did maimer to both women, tzricho shnei gittin v'chalitza. You need 2 gittin because you did maimer to both women. They both need to be divorced. And you also need 1 chalitza. Rashi here, right to our left, highlights v'chalitza la'achas min u'puteres sarasa. Any one of them could get chalitza, but because they're both yevamos, you have to get yourself out of that scenario of yibum because otherwise they're both trapped. And because they're both trapped, you need to do at least chalitza to 1. 3 lines down, maimer bezu v'get lezu. If you did maimer to Chana and gave a get to Penina, tzricha get v'chalitza, then the one who got maimer needs a get, and the one who got a get needs chalitza, and that's how she would become free to marry anyone she wants. Maimer bezu ubaal eszu. If he did maimer to Chana and he was intimate with Penina, tzrichos beis gittin v'chalitza. That tashma shemita was aser, and because you did maimer and slept with the other woman, so therefore you need 2 gittin, 1 for each woman, and you still need chalitza. There's still zika because you haven't solved the yibum issue. Get lezu v'get lezu. Then if you gave a get 1 to Chana and 1 to Penina, tzrichos hemana chalitza. That's great that you solved the problem potentially of the maimer had there been maimer, but there's still yevamos and you still need to do chalitza. Get lezu ubaal eszu. If he gave a get to one woman and he was intimate with another, tzricha get v'chalitza. The woman with whom he was intimate, she needs a get. And the woman who had a get, she needs chalitza, and the chalitza will then exempt the other woman from the yibum status as well. Get lezu umaimer bezu. You can understand the tedious nature of this Mishnah. We've done 15 cases so far, and we haven't gone deep on any of them. On the surface, they all make a lot of sense. They're pretty quick, but they do take time to process. So get lezu that we did, and get lazu umaimer bezu. If you do a get for one and mimer to the other, so tzricha get v'chalitza. What about get lazu v'chalatz lazu? If you gave a get to one and chalitza to the other, ein achar chalitza klum. The chalitza is perfect, because once you do the chalitza, it patters everyone from yibum, and you gave a get to the other woman, there's no problem there at all. A quarter of the way down. Chalatz v'chalatz. O chalatz v'asa maimer. If you did chalitza to both, or if you did chalitza to one and mimer to the other, or nasan get uva'al, or if you gave a get and then had tashma shemita with the other, oh ba'al uva'al, you had tashma shemita with both, oh ba'al va'asa maimer, or you had tashma shemita with one and did mimer to the other, nasan get v'chalatz, or you gave a get and did chalitza to the other, ein achar chalitza klum. In all of these cases, when there was chalitza, you are all done. Says the Gemara, bein yavam echad l'shtei yevamos. This our Mishnah is just being very thorough to say that we've included all of the cases, all the case scenarios. So the Reish of our Mishnah quotes a machlokas, and then we see two parts of the Mishnah: one discussing a single Yevama and her Yavam, and the next part of the Mishnah discussing two Yevamos and their Yavam. Chalatz ve'asa maimer nasan. Let's say a person was chalatz and he did maimer, and then or nasan get uva'al, or ba'al va'asa maimer, or v'nasan get v'chalatz, ein achar chalitza klum, bein betchila, bein be'emtza, bein besof. Wherever the chalitza is, once a chalitza is done, all of the ties are severed, no matter what else took place, because chalitza is what exempts someone from this zika bond. So therefore, all problems are solved. Tanakama here holds v'habeila bizmanchi b'tchila ein achareha klum. When the first thing that takes place is the tashma shamita, then ein achareha klum, because then they're married. Okay, what if the be'ila was be'emtza uviso? So then yesh achareha klum. If the bia in the flow of events here, if the bia was in the middle of the scenario, meaning something took place before the tashma shamita, or if it was the last thing, then because other things took place beforehand, it's not so clear yesh achareha klum. Then there will be things afterwards. For example, a get, like we saw earlier in the Mishnah, because if one has tashma shamita, then there will likely need to be a divorce afterwards. Reb Nechemya argues. Reb Nechemya Omer, and this will bring us to the end of the Mishnah. Reb Nechemya says, achas be'ila, be'achas chalitza, whether or not we're talking about be'ila or chalitza, bein betchila, bein be'emsa, bein besof, ein achareha klum. That no matter when these issues take place, these interactions take place, be it tashma shamita or chalitza, no matter what, ein achareha klum, this is going to override everything else. So we started our Mishnah with a discussion about maimer and with a discussion about get. We're ending our Mishnah with a discussion about chalitza and bia. Now, these are the four categories that we've just discussed in about 20 plus cases. The reason why the end of our Mishnah holds this way is because the only thing that's deoraisa when it comes to a Yevama is tashma shamita or chalitza. When it comes to maimer and when it comes to get, those are rabbinic injunctions that sometimes play a role with a Yevama. But mi deoraisa, maimer and get are a zero when it comes to a Yevama. Nothing at all. The only option to get a Yevama out of her status mi deoraisa is tashma shamita with her yavam or chalitza from her yavam. That's it. So Reb Nechemya is kind of taking a hard line here to say, stop with all the rabbinic injunctions. I'm telling you, the only things that matter here to free this woman are chalitza and bia. Nothing else matters. Masha'en Ken, the Tanakama, was of a slightly different opinion that we do have an influence from maimer, we do have an influence from get, even though they are only rabbinic in nature. Simple Mishnah, just a lot of cases, but if there's a Gemara to do Chazara over, this is the kind of Gemara that could use a once over or a, how do you say 5 times over? There's got to be a word for that. I don't speak enough English for that. So the Gemara opens halfway down, 2 lines before the wide lines on Nun Amud Beis, long Mishnah, and here's what the Gemara says, referencing our machlokes in the Reisha of our Mishnah. So our machlokes was between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim, where Rabban Gamliel was of the opinion that ein get achar get v'lo maimer achar maimer, and the Chachamim argued on those cases. He says that, yeah, there is a get after a get, and there is maimer achar maimer. Remember, these are only rabbinic in nature. So let's see what the Gemara says. It says the Gemara, ad kan, lo pligi ela beget achar get maimer achar maimer. The only machlokas between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim is when one woman gets a get and the second woman gets a get, or when one woman gets maimer and the second woman gets maimer. But what if there is a cross-pollination of items here? Aval get echad biyavama, umaimer echad biyavama mahani. There, we would say that latter maimer will still work, even though it's after a get. Okay, why is this the case? The Gemara is now going to ask 4 questions and answer all 4 questions about the Shita of the Chachamim, who say that Maimer still works after a get and that get still works after Maimer. So let's learn these 4 things and then we'll wrap up on the very bottom line of the page. Says the Gemara as follows. Where are we? Here we go. 2 lines into the almost. 1 line into the wide lines. My taima amur Rabbanan nami biyavama mahani. Excuse me, I skipped a word there. My taima amur Rabbanan get biyavama mahani. Why is it that the rabbis allowed for a get to be effective in regards to a yavama? A get really has nothing to do with a yavama. A get has to do with marriage. A regular marriage can have a get, but a yavama can't really have a get midoraisa. Why are they including a get, which really is not connected to yavama? Why are they allowing that to have any role here at all? The Gemara says, Mishum de mahani be'alma, because in general, we do have a principle of get. What might have been our misunderstanding if by yavama we didn't have a presence of the idea of get? If you would have said by yibum that get plays no role, then Amre, people will say as follows: get lehotzia, v'chalitza lehotzia. We know that a get is used to extricate someone from marriage. V'chalitza lehotzia. We also know that chalitza is used to end a status of yibum. Umi de get lo mahani. Had it been that over here we didn't allow for get, then maybe we would have made an error and chalitza nami lo mahani. Maybe we would have thought that chalitza doesn't help either. Ve'asi lenival achar chalitza. And had one then had tashma shemita after chalitza, that would be a very big problem. That's an Isser Doraisa. So therefore, we didn't want anyone to have a misunderstanding about chalitza. So therefore, get, which really doesn't apply by the world of Yibum, we rabbinically say that it applies by Yibum so that we don't end up in a scenario where someone does chalitza and then has tashma shamita with the chalitza. Okay, so that answers that question as to why we have get. Says the Gemara, Umay taima amur rabbanan maimer biyavama mahani. Why is it that we say that maimer, kiddusha yavama, or kiddusha yibum as it's called? Why do we have this subpar marriage that exists in the world of yibum? It's not really a marriage. It's only a rabbinic marriage. Why did we need that? So it says the Gemara, Mishum demahani ba'alma, because in general marriage works. Diamris lo mahani, had it been that in regards to yibum, you would not have spoken about the case of Maimer, Amri, I might have thought, Maimer liknos, ubia liknos. Maimer helps to make somewhat of a kinyan with a yavama, and bia tashma shamita, regular marriage helps to be kona, a regular woman. Umida lo mahani, bia nami lo, umida amar, Umida Maimer lo mahani, and had it been that Maimer didn't work in our case, I might have thought that bia nami lo mahanya, that the tashma shamita with the yavama, meaning consecrating the marriage to create yibum through tashma shamita, also might not help. And then maybe he would have decided to marry another one of the Yevamos or another woman entirely. And that's usher because you're actually married to this woman who you had tashma shamita with. So out of concern that we would have said that maybe because there's no maimer, there's also no regular bia by that actually is effective in regards to yibum. So therefore we have maimer by our case of yibum. Next case, 8 lines from the bottom. Why is it that the Chachamim were of the opinion that bia psula? What's bia psula? Bia psula in this case is where a man has 2 Yevamos and he has tashma shamita with Chana, followed by tashma shamita with Penina. So it says the Gemara, if that happens, that second bia still can have something impacted afterwards. Maybe it may need a get. Why would you say that? Amre, I bia achar haget. If it were to be bia after a get, so then gzeira bia achar haget mishum bia achar chalitza. That I could understand that if the bia had taken place after a get, then yes, that gzeira bia achar haget mishum bia achar chalitza. We would never want anyone to make that error. The bia achar maimer he, had it been tashma shamita after maimer, gzeira bia achar maimer mishum bia achar bia. So there we wanted to make sure that we don't come over to an error of bia achar bia, of being intimate with another woman when you're not allowed. And for the last case of the night, umay taima amar rabbanan hai chalitza psula ein acharehat klum. Why is it that when it comes to a chalitza psula that there's nothing to follow? By bia psula, we said there was something that could follow. Why by chalitza psula do we not say that anything can follow? So it says the Gemara, Amre, my nigzor, what gezerah could you possibly put here? There's no reason to have any concerns. Nigzor chalitza achar haget mishum chalitza achar chalitza. We're not going to be concerned about chalitza achar haget because of chalitza achar chalitza. Why not? Because if you do one chalitza after another one, it's no big deal. Kol kihani tachlos v'tezel. Go ahead. do as many chalitzos as you want. It doesn't cause any secondary problems. So just keep doing your chalitzos if you want. There's no reason to have a rabbinic conjunction here. And ligzor chalitza achar maimer mishum chalitza achar bia. If you want to say that we should have a gzera of chalitza after maimer because of chalitza after bia, so atu chalitza achar maimer. If there was such a case of chalitza achar maimer, so then mi lo boya get lema'amaro. We would also then need a get in a case had there been maimer. So therefore, chalitza achar bia nami baya get libiaso, and chalitza after tashmish amita would also require a get. So there's no reason to have any rabbinic conjunctions in regards to the case of chalitza psula. So let's review, and then we'll wrap up right here. Short shiur for tonight. We learned a new Mishnah with many cases in them, and the primary cases of our Mishnah are discussing 4 areas of halacha, 2 rabbinic and 2 biblical. The 2 rabbinic ones are maimer and get, which have nothing to do with Yibum fundamentally, but due to the concerns listed on the bottom of Nun Amud Beis, we included them so that people wouldn't end up cohabiting with the wrong people. That's why we included get, that's why we included maimer. But midoraisa, the only things that have a proper impact midoraisa on the Yevama is tashmish amita with the yavam or chalitza from the yavam. Everything else is commentary. So all of these cases are relevant and applicable, and it's a good Mishnah to go over with a kahati, a great Mishnah to learn with kahati. It'll be very concise and very clear, and then hopefully the Gemara will then become even clearer if you have some time to do that. We'll stop right here. We'll pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night with Daf Nun Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
We just done the Mishnah for us.